that the chapter has been hosting. The third now in a row from the Strategy and Portfolio Planning Committee, which Stephen Coulthard is the chair. And I will hand it off to Stephen to discuss what this panel is all about. This is a unique one, as it's not generated directly from one of our content committees, but an industry grouping that's gotten together. So I'll let them talk about how that came to be and what they're representing here to the CoreNet chapter. One thing I just wanted to say in advance is just a little plug for next week's session. These Wednesday sessions have been great. We have, and again, this is really not out of one direct committee, but a few of our chapter members have organized a lessons learned from returning to work from Asia Pac. So we have some killer panelists that will be moderated by Nishar Fatima of Space Matrix and Thomas Bade Matheson of Altanova. The speakers are Catherine Harris Thomas, Managing Director of the Global Business Partner for Deutsche Bank, Dennis McGowan, Head of Global Real Estate for Standard Chartered Bank, Sanjeev Tulacheri, Senior Vice President and Head of Workplace for Northern Trust Corporation, and Stella Wang, Global Facilities Manager for Teva Pharmaceuticals. Maybe she can talk to us about a potential vaccine as well. So with that, again, I'd remind you to keep your phones muted and video off for the time being, and I'll hand it off to the SPP Chair, Stephen Coulthard, to introduce our committee. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Tommy, and welcome back to all of those who joined us for our last two events. 2 weeks ago, we focused on the upcoming reopening of buildings. Last week, we fast forwarded 12 months to discuss the future of workplace. This week, we're going to pull it right back to the present day to discuss what is happening on construction projects in New York City. Before we start, unlike other webinars, we have chosen to encourage audience participation. With this in mind, we don't have full control of your audio and video. So can I please ask everyone to keep your audio and video switched off and use the chat feature during the panel discussion, which will last around 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, we will call out individuals to turn on their audio and video and to ask the questions they raised in the chat room. Today's panel represents a newly formed alliance of owners reps and project management firms who serve clients in the New York area. The purpose of the alliance is to harness their collective expertise and to provide clear guidance and recommendations to clients and the design and construction industry as a whole. Joining us today, we have John Robbins, Head of USA Operations and North America's Real Estate at Turner & Townsend, Kirsten Beck, who heads up New York PM team at Avison Young, Richard Jantz, who heads up the Tri-State PDS team at Cushman & Wakefield. And finally, I will hand you over to our moderator, Francis Graham, Senior Managing Director at Newmark Knight Frank. Enjoy the panel.
Thank you, Stephen. And I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. This is our new alliance. As Stephen had said, this was the brainchild, I'll call it, of Frank Alvarado at CBRE. He put all of us together, the leaders in project management and owner rep firms. Usually we're competitors, but we've all come together as one voice, especially in this crisis. And we hope that what we bring you today is both insightful and thought-provoking. And I'm going to start out with Richard. If you want to just give us a little look at the current construction status in New York City, and where you see it going in the future when restrictions are slightly eased.
Sure. Yeah, look, I think everybody's been watching the news and seeing the governor's executive orders. Essentially, as we know, the construction was made non-essential about 2 weeks after the stay-at-home order was put in place on March 16th. We believe that it will become one of the first that is made essential. We've started to see that in areas of the city. Our forecast right now is that we would expect to see construction start sometime in the first week of June. It is declared in the phase 1 portion of the reopening of New York. We've already achieved that in some areas of New York, almost all of New Jersey, which many of my New Jersey projects kicked back off. In Connecticut, we're expecting to follow very shortly. The DOB has done some great work in allowing the guidance of how that construction will come back to market. with safety protocols. We had worked closely with Revney to define some of those protocols on how a construction workplace can function properly as it comes out and maintain social distancing, but maintain overall job site safety and cleanliness. So again, overall, we believe that construction will begin downstate in Manhattan sometime in the first week in June. And we believe that the protocols that have been put in place for access to job sites, PPE, cleanliness, and everything else are pretty well defined at this point. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to get back into business in the next 2 weeks or so.
Thanks, Richard. So I'm going to move on. Kirsten, why don't we talk about some of the cost impact of the extended schedules, and as Richard discussed, the cleanliness requirements that are being enforced on project sites.
Sure. Thanks, Fran. Good afternoon or good morning, everybody, wherever you are. You know, if anyone has current construction projects that are ongoing and you're getting ramping up to go back to site, as we're hoping, as Richard said, we'll do in the next couple of weeks, you're going to start getting those change orders, and you should be prepared for them. You know, we're seeing, you know, tens of thousands of dollars in additional cleaning and PPE, and obviously that goes up, bigger projects, more tradespeople, more PPE. How I see it unrolling in the future is it'll just become, if these types of requirements continue, it will become part of your general conditions. So you can expect those general conditions to increase a few to several percentage points if these type of requirements continue. You know, we're also looking at, you know, extended schedules because of the requirements to de-densify the sites, where I don't know if Richard mentioned this, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating, but I believe initially we're limited to one tradesperson per 250 square feet. So that's how many people you can have on site. Now, typically, you know, you'd move groups of people around. You also have to control social distancing of the tradespeople. And obviously some jobs require 2 or 3 or 4 people. So you just have to have all of the PPE. But with extended schedules related to the fact that you can only get, you know, all of our work is on man hours, or people hours, I guess we should say now. And how many people hours it takes doesn't really change. So if you can only get a certain number of people in a space at a time, it's going to extend your schedule, which will potentially have a couple of impacts. One is it could be shift differential if you're dealing with unions. And if nothing else, it will extend your general conditions, because if your schedule extends, you'll need, you know, all of your general contractor overhead, your project manager, superintendents, et cetera, ongoing through the extended project.
I will add one thing, Kirsten, on the issue of the extended hours and the staggered shifts. Obviously, that is in the guidance and the executive order on how we reopen. But we also worked very closely with the DOB to extend the after hour or the workday to reduce the amount of after hours variances, to reduce some of the burden on clients to pay for those staggered hours and the things that Kirsten was laying out. So they are actually extending the workday. It was defined as 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. And if you worked outside those hours, you needed to get an AHV, as we all know. This is changing, where they're going to go now from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. to allow a more staggered time frame for people to come onto the job site and actually get some extended hours, so that you can get 2 7-hour shifts with only a little bit of overlap. So everybody's working toward all of these things to try to mitigate as much as humanly possible some of the stuff that we're doing.
Yeah.
Thanks. So John, do you want to jump in here and just talk about possible avenues which can be pursued or implemented to create schedule savings, given the likely impacts on the construction process of COVID-19?
Sure, Fran, thanks. I do think, you know, some good points were already brought up around staggered shifts in time during the construction process. But maybe even if we back up a bit, I think depending on what phase your project may be in, if it's still in the design phase or, you know, yet to hit the drawing boards, probably just dated myself about drawing boards, but next I'll be talking about slide rules as well. But I think in the design phase, you know, certainly there's a lot that architects and engineers can do together with clients making sure we've got readily available materials, simple shapes and geometries of things that, again, are readily available, making sure we're not trying to obtain materials that we know will likely be in short supply. Obviously, supply chain, we're going to touch on that a bit later, but that's going to have a big play in this to really save time once the project gets to the field. But in construction, I do think it's going to be a bit of an experiment, as obviously some essential projects have been continuing. I think everyone in this panel is probably involved in a project or two that has continued, and it's been interesting to watch on different sites and different logistics how we've worked that through. There is no doubt, Kirsten mentioned, there is going to be schedule impact, no doubt about it. I think really now trying to mitigate the cost of that, or look for those ideas that can save some schedule time, split shifts, phase starts, things of that nature. As Rich mentioned, the building department has kind of flip-flopped the hours. We're also getting cooperation from the trade unions as well to look a little bit differently at shifts and shift differentials. So that should help too. They may likely pick up some of that burden. The interesting thing we're finding, though, on projects that have continued, by practicing the social distancing on the site, at times we're getting better productivity. And I know it may sound counterintuitive, but think of some of our busy interior build sites in particular, where you've got a lot of workers crammed basically within 4 walls. By starting different shifts or running 2 shifts, we've actually seen some increases in productivity. So I think it's going to vary job to job. I think that the shift and staggered start and can we improve productivity on the site will probably be the biggest schedule savings ideas that can be generated for projects that are already in construction.
I was just going to say, following up on that, Kirsten, maybe you want to just talk about construction site shutdowns and reduced labor density that John was just referring to, and about the impact when we return on the project schedules.
I think we have covered a lot of that, but there, just because we're seeing it now in the chat, there are some comments about shutdowns post reopening, and the requirement that if we reopen and there are positive cases, which is of course bound to happen when we start recirculating, that then they're mandatory. Following that, there are mandatory shutdowns. So for anyone who is in the middle of a project now, you sort of have to build in somewhere in your schedule an assumption that you will have a shutdown along the way. So, a lot of what we're talking about are things that we're going to have to see what happens when they happen. John made a good point that there are projects continuing through this time, and those projects are following PPE requirements and these reduced density requirements. So we're getting a little bit of insight there, but when we really reopen the economy and people are really moving around and we do see infection rates bump up a little, which we may, we're going to start and stop a lot. I don't know if anyone else listens to The Daily, which I do pretty regularly, but there's a whole concept of the dance and the hammer, and that's definitely what we're going to be doing. We're going to be taking 2 or 3 steps forward and then 2 steps back. So every project is going to need both time and budget contingency, which hopefully you already have. But unfortunately, there is a lot of this that we don't know about yet, just like everything else to do with this pandemic.
But to be really clear, look, I think the idea is to keep workers safe, keep everyone safe. And I have about a half a dozen projects running right now, about 800 men across the city. Prior, they were all deemed essential projects on the financial side or data center side or anything else. We actually have not seen, up to this point, and we've been running through almost the entire stay-at-home period, we have not seen a mass shutdown of job sites due to COVID cells or multiple cases being reported in one location. So what they're doing now has been working. They've ramped it up in the recent executive order. But what's really important to note is that we're trying to get people before they come to the job site to stay home, right? So the initial request is, if you don't feel good, stay home. We then have a temperature check at the front door and a questionnaire. So one of the questions that came up in the chat was, there's what are the requirements for a plan? Every GC must have a plan in place, and they are requiring that a questionnaire be filled out for contract tracing purposes. So if you do get a positive or someone not feeling well that day on a job site, we ask them to leave. If they've been admitted to the site, you do an area clean. You identify the people they've been in contact with specifically on the job site, and the job continues. So unless we see multiple sites start to multiply, or multiple cases start to multiply on one site, we do not anticipate fully shutting down, but there could be areas shut down for enhanced cleaning. So just to let everybody know, it's not like we're gonna go to work, one case comes in and the whole job site shuts down. That's not what we're doing. And that's not the guidance at this point, but obviously if there is a cluster, we start to react differently.
And Richard, do you just want to continue and talk about what we can expect from the landlords and what they're implementing that might further impact construction, and as you're discussing us getting in and out and how many people are on the job site?
Yeah, the landlord challenges are interesting because they actually have three distinct populations that they need to solve for, right? The first is their staff, their security, their porters, the building management team, everything else. So there's a protocol for office work, back to work, and what are you doing to protect them? Population two, we all know, are the tenancy. So people are coming in and out of that lobby regularly. And then you have the third party people, the UPS teams, the construction people, the delivery folks who are bringing food in. So they've had this multi-headed hydra that they've been dealing with, and they've been really concerned about how to manage that. So each of the larger landlords in the city have had three very distinct protocols on how to deal with this. And the construction protocol is actually helping the landlords because it really gives them some definition around how the construction sites will operate and must operate. They have to control from loading dock to job site up the elevator, right? So their requirements have been largely limited, which is a good thing for them because it's just so much to manage for pushing a lot of that responsibility to the GCs. So now they have to deal with their areas. So what we're recommending everybody do right away is speak with your landlord, have a really open dialogue, not only if you, in your current building where you physically sit or will be sitting, what is their plan? And then from there, how are they dealing with the elevator queues? Again, they're going to have staggered openings. They're going to have a bunch of that stuff as well. So it has been very difficult, and each one will be a bespoke solution for the building itself. Some buildings share lifts with third parties as well as tenancies. Some buildings have lots of room on loading docks to separate those populations. So it really is going to be very, very specific per building. And I know all the C&W asset managers have been working night and day, keeping the buildings not only running, but also developing these plans around the Safe 6.
Thanks. I think that that touches a lot on what our end users, who are our clients, are going to really be looking for from all of us as owner reps and project management. John, do you see opportunities for new and emerging technologies to help make the construction sites safer and potentially faster, since we are going to be losing some time getting in and out?
Yeah, definitely, for sure, Fran. I do think, we're starting to see signs of it emerge. Construction has always been one of those industries that's lagged behind on the technological evolution front. It's still kind of brick by brick. I don't think there'll be any argument from the panel or all our folks connected in that, construction's been a bit behind the curve there. But what we are seeing, and maybe COVID-19 has been a bit of a catalyst, we are starting to see some really dynamic changes. It'll be interesting to see how they take here in New York, but certainly elsewhere, we're seeing the DOBs becoming very sophisticated almost overnight. We know the New York City DOB now takes electronic submissions, but elsewhere around the country, we're seeing that really now extend at the DOB level beyond just submissions and plan approvals to even how they're doing virtual inspections. Doing a lot by video capture and things of that nature. Again, really in an effort to keep the site safe, keep the density population down low on the site. So a lot of DOBs around the country are starting to investigate those sorts of inspections. So I think that'll be one area that touches both on great use of technology that's already available, but as well as keeping those inspectors safe and keeping the job sites less dense. But I do think there can be some other underpinnings of technology that we'll see Obviously it's already been touched on, Richard touched on it, some of the screening that's being done on construction sites. The governor's been very clear about a mandate on, the rules of the road, so to speak, on what will constitute a safe construction site, temperature screenings, things of that nature. So I think that will continue. There's lots of video capture technology that's now being used, much that's already been tested in Asia, since they were really first on the curve of COVID-19, that I think we'll start to see make its way here onto our various job sites, especially some of the larger construction sites. But you're seeing better use of virtual technology. Hollow Builder, for example, kind of that 360 digital access is being used quite a bit to do great, really high-def video capture of what's going on projects. Better use of robotics, 3D printing, obviously, we've heard much about, and really some great robotics around, doing some of the lifting that needs to be done, the exoskeletons that need to be erected on new construction buildings and whatnot. Much of that can now all be robotically controlled. Again, it provides both safety in general, but safety in the times we live in. But I also think it could have some good schedule impacts as well to speed things up. It doesn't replace humans. We're still going to have lots of construction workers on site. Maybe some will be retrained using some of these technologies. But it does feel like this is a time when technology is really going to finally make its way in a much bigger way into the construction industry. We're already there with design, lots of great work with BIM and VDC and whatnot, but now it's time to bring it onto site.
Thanks, John. Kirsten, you want to follow up on, I guess, some of the installation, the FF&E installation, and how that's going to be managed differently in the whole supply chain issues that we'll be facing when we get back?
Sure. Thank you. I think most of us have been through this many times, and we're all familiar with those last few weeks of a job where everyone is, as John said, all on top of each other within four walls. The GC's trying to finish up punch list. Your furniture installer is trying to put together the last pieces of furniture. Your AV integrator standing on the conference room tables. I know they never do that, but we just kind of throw everyone at the job at the end of the job to get it done. And that's, we kind of plan for that. The furniture people follow behind the contractor as they're finishing up the flooring. It's very, very common. And all of my schedule templates include that overlap. But with these limitations on tradespeople on the floor, if I'm a general contractor and I'm only allowed to have 100 people on the floor, I'm not letting me have 20 of those people for furniture installation, because I have a job to finish and I want to finish it as efficiently as possible and as quickly as possible. So I'm going through every open project that we have right now. We're reviewing every schedule and we're pushing FF&E installation to post substantial completion. So there's still a little bit that overlaps. Electrified furniture needs to come in while the electrician is still on site. Those kind of things, infrastructure is still happening, IT cabling and AV cabling is happening while walls are open, and that's all being coordinated. But I think in a lot of cases, we never really, I'm not going to be honest, I never think about it. I don't say, well, how many people are you going to have on the job because I'm sending my 5 AV people or 6 or 10. I just say, what day do you want my AV people there? And they say Tuesday, and they show up. And everybody, people grumble at times. There's too many people. They're all in one corner trying to finish something up. But, we're really going to have to work closely ourselves with our vendors, our integrators, and our furniture installers, and with our GCs, and really plan who's going to be on the site every day. And so for now, until we see how this all plays out, and, as we've seen how much can change in 2 months, 6 months from now, we could be living in a completely different world. Maybe there's a vaccine and everything just goes back to the way it was. But for now, and to give our clients an understanding of where we believe things will be, we're extending all of our schedules. And if they can't be extended because there are lease expirations and other things, impacts from other sides, then we're figuring out how to work around that. Do we have to work weekends? Do we have to, work even an additional shift? So they're all things that have to be taken into account. And in my opinion, it's best to plan for that now, even if your project has started. I think you need to assume that this situation that we're in is going to extend for some time. So your project schedules and budgets should be adjusted accordingly.
Thanks, Kirsten. I think, Richard, you had more to talk about the supply chain challenges as construction restarts, and I think hitting on a couple of the topics that Kirsten touched on about getting us back in, getting the contractors back into the buildings.
Yeah, we did a bit of a deeper dive into a supply chain nationally, and it was interesting. At one point in week 4 or 5 of the stay-at-home, with again the essential workers and certain job sites still running, every single day we got a different data point that would say that something had a delay, whether it was metal bucks being fabricated with the raw materials, whether it was a piece of stone from Italy coming over because that supply chain had broken for a little while, a lot of the light fixtures from China. It was fluctuating back and forth so greatly. It was really difficult to put any guidance out on it. So what we're seeing right now is overall we have seen little parts and pieces of certain items from a supply chain standpoint that are breaking down. But overall, we have not seen a major collapse of raw materials being able to get to job sites. But we have an interesting curve coming up ahead of us. And one of the curves are when everybody comes back to work, right? We anticipate on the phase 1 reopening, 130,000 tradesmen coming back into the city, jobs opening up, and in that phase 1 period, right? And that's about half of the people that we normally see working on job sites. We anticipate that initial kickoff of all those projects that have either stalled and need to restart immediately or are restarting upon the phase 1 declaration, we're going to see a rush for material, right? So we actually were asking questions now, and I think Kirsten and I had a great conversation about this last week. We are forecasting a little bit of a lull or delay in the supply chain that we're not seeing today because the demand isn't high. And she strategized on a great opportunity, great recommendation to clients and it actually came out and was supported by a document from Structure Tone today on their supply chain recommendations is that you should be getting all of your materials, shop drawings, everything accelerated. Normally we spread that out over the first 5 or 6 weeks of a job. Get all of your shop drawings identified, get orders in early, and stockpile your materials if you can, so that you almost have a just-in-time scenario going for your project implementation. It's a bit of a shift because normally we don't have a lot of storage on job sites in New York, so we don't have a yard to put stuff in, so we get stuff as we need it. The counsel here really is accelerate, get your materials, pay a little bit of storage, and have your job sites ready to accept. So that you can move your schedules along. The worst thing could be is that you've got a great momentum on a job site and you can't get bucks, so you can't get your stone for your pantries, or you can't get any of that stuff. So, and furniture falls within that category as well. So really being proactive in how you plan for a potential dip in supply chain, I think is really, really good counsel right now.
Thanks. Kirsten, is there anything you want to add about your discussion that you and Richard had last week? I know you talked a lot about your office and what you've done to push your office ahead that you're building out now.
Yes, thanks. Actually, for everyone who doesn't know, we are in the process of building the new Avis and Young office at 530 Fifth. And basically, the way that this conversation started was I was using that as an example. You know, we went on shutdown, late in March, and of course, at that time, we really didn't know how long we were going to be shut down. Nobody did. But I basically called the team together and I said, okay, everyone, the rest of us are still working remotely. I've had a lot of friends not in the industry say to me, well, what can you possibly be doing? Construction is shut down. Construction is very important and it provides for all of us, but there's a lot of work outside of the physical construction of the space. And so all of our design projects are continuing, et cetera. But to this point, I called my team together and I said, I want every shop drawing done circulated, approved. You know, almost nothing gets approved on the first pass anyway. These things shouldn't be sitting. You know, and to Richard's point, we typically spread it out. We prioritize that list. But I wanted everything that I needed to be in the queue because a lot of factories were shut down at the time. And I knew that production would begin, you know, first come, first serve. So I said, everybody get in line. You know, we pushed the furniture and now we're going to have to ask to delay delivery, but that's okay. That's a better scenario than not having furniture. Light fixtures, things like that. You know, I got an update yesterday and I ripped into everybody because I was like, there are 5 light fixtures on here that say that shop drawings are outstanding. And the lighting vendor got back to me and said, the notes aren't really clear. These are all just kind of on hold, you know, holding for clarification on something else, et cetera. So, you know, being really on top of things like that. And, you know, obviously the contractors are doing their job, but it helps to have an extra person kind of going, you know, prodding it along. And I mean, that's what we're there for, right? To make sure everyone's doing their bits and pieces, making sure the engineer is approving their shop drawings. You know, we have millwork shops, they're all in. The millworker can hold on to them for now, but once he's good to go, he should have fully approved shop drawings ready to start manufacturing, so.
Thanks. And John, I think maybe you'd like to just talk a little bit about, as we're talking about getting things onto the site, this idea of design for manufacturing, prefabrication and off-site building, so that when we are ready to go, these things are in the queue.
Yeah, sure. I'll add one quick point to the conversation that just happened with Richard and Kirsten. I was on an early morning call with some of my colleagues from Asia, and as we know, there are a couple of 3 weeks ahead of us here on construction restart and really getting back to business. And what Richard mentioned and Kirsten as well has completely rang true. They had sort of this initial, as they ramped back up and many workers were coming back to site, there was just such a demand and draw on materials, everything from, you know, sheetrock and piping to metal studs and light fixtures, that they completely drained the local supply chain. They've since gotten back in the last couple of weeks, but there was that initial rush, that initial sprint, definitely had an impact. So I would validate, you know, what we've already heard. We should get ready for that happening here because, as Rich mentioned, we'll have 100,000 plus workers, you know, coming back all within a week or two of each other, and there's going to be a big draw on demand on the supply chain. But anyway, on design for manufacture, it's been an interesting topic because I think similar to technology, it is something that folks are embracing more and more. I think there's always been this notion that contractors have resisted design for manufacture, but that's not really the case. It's really from the contracting community that a lot of things that now have been proven can be, you know, designed and built off-site in a almost a factory-controlled situation, really were developed by contractors so they can be more efficient and quicker on the job site. So again, I think we're going to see more and more of that. You know, everything from, you know, simple piping assemblies to obviously it's already done now, completed hotel rooms that, you know, come in a shipping container and almost are ready to plug and play. We've seen some of that in New York, but you see a lot of that elsewhere around the country. It's been proven certainly in the residential community for many years. So I do think there's opportunity to see more of that. And I think it'll put, you know, even pressure on the design community to come up with ideas in design that potentially can be built off-site in modules, in componentry that can then be brought to site. It could have schedule saving impacts for sure. You obviously get better QA, QC if you're in a more factory controlled environment, you know, safer for the workers on site if certain things can be done off-site. So again, I do think not only will contractors embrace it, but I think, you know, we're right at the cusp again of sort of a revolution on design for manufacture to see it much more in the commercial space now, as we've seen it in, you know, other parts of the built environment, such as residential. So stay tuned. It'll be interesting to see over the next year to 2 years what develops in that space.
Thanks, John. I think we'll move into some questions and answers that we have, because that's the end of what we wanted to talk about in broad stroke. And so there's a couple of questions. John from CJD, do you want to turn on your mic and your video and ask your question? John Ponticello?
Yeah, Fran, I don't think I had a question. It was just really more of a comment that I made earlier on about sites shutting down. And we've seen that out west. We have a couple projects in Texas that one of them just recently last week had shut down. So it's obviously, it depends on the client and what their appetite for risk is. This particular client decided to shut down for 2 weeks. And, to Richard's point before, if you're not seeing a cluster of illnesses, obviously there are procedures that we could take to get back up and running quick. But in this case, we just got started a week ago and we're losing 2 weeks on this project. And I'm sure, that this project has a few months left in it. I'm sure it's going to happen again. So just something that we need to build in and think about with our projects, that it's inevitable that there's going to be maybe not an outbreak, but at least some cases that we need to consider.
Yeah, and it's a very good point, John. I think, and it's going to be so much based on the DNA of the job, right, and of the client. And I think that we had, just like when this whole thing happened, there were clients that said to me, "I don't care what we have to do, get my job running. I want to finish it." And there were clients that said, "You know what, we're just going to back off and wait till this thing kind of lays down a little bit." So I think you're going to see the same thing. I know there was another comment on what degree of certainty we have. I can only go back to this half a dozen projects that we have running right now that we're overseeing directly, and where we've had 1 or 2 cases spread out over those 800 guys over 10 weeks. Very low instance of this, and those jobs did not shut down. So I'm not suggesting in any way that you might not shut your job down. I'm saying we're not counseling clients that if you have 1 or 2 cases, that it's a cause to shut down. You have to watch it. But again, the purpose of this, when you get back to work, is really figuring out where people are going, who they're touching. So when you do have a case, and there will be cases, how do you manage it the best? And do you shut the job site down for the day and do an enhanced cleaning and have everybody come back? Or you let it sit for a little while? And again, it really depends on so many factors that you can't crystal ball this. But we have not seen on the essential jobs, we have not seen wholesale shutdowns of hundreds of men for periods of time. So that's what I referenced before.
I think talking about job sites again too, Larry Charlip had a question, and I think Mindy had an answer to it too, about COVID-19 operation manuals on site. And I don't know if any of you want to address, they are required on site. We've seen them from every one of our general contractors. Does one of you want to point out on a specific project that you've been working on?
Yeah, John, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Fran. And they are required on site, very specific to that site. Obviously, they've got to meet all the general requirements that have been set forth by the state and the city. But then there's going to be, lots of nuances to a particular site. It's interesting. We had a project last week, again, that was deemed essential. We had our COVID-19 manual on site, and an inspector showed up. So, everybody get ready for that. The inspectors are really doing their job when it comes to making sure sites are safe. He spent a lot of time going through that manual and actually, called out a few things from that manual. Thankfully, didn't shut down the job, but noted a couple of things to the general contractor that weren't being, followed to the letter of the law in the manual. Nothing major, but it is definitely a requirement. Definitely takes time to pull it together. And I think someone mentioned earlier, maybe Rich mentioned early on, we're still kind of in the exploration phase of this. And I do think, we're going to get much, much more data, hopefully come the first week of June, as different sites and different site conditions start to show themselves, changes that may have to be made to the rules and the guidance that have already been set forth. So, a bit of a learning curve on all of this as well that we should be ready for.
Totally agree. And look, I think it's really important that this is going to fall into the GC's lap in a big way. I think that, there's all a bunch of sticky points that we haven't even gotten to yet on broad liabilities and how this is going to affect force majeure and contracts and leases and all these other things that we're all trying to get our heads around. But the fact of the matter is you have to have a plan on the site. The plan has to be supported by the building and the landlord that you're in the building you're working in. And our role as owners, reps, and project managers are to make sure that the plan follows the general guidelines and that it's actually being implemented. There's some issues even in the guidance. If you take a look at them and you read them with any specificity, they talk about you can't ask certain questions because of HIPAA guidelines, but they want you to fill out a questionnaire for everybody on the way in on who you've been in contact with. So it's a weird thing. People are trying to be safe. I'm actually shocked based on, the numbers and everything else that we've seen, that we haven't seen more instances of construction site cases. But I think personally that construction sites are naturally safer for a couple of reasons. One is PPE is a fairly common thing. You walk around a job site, you see guys in masks normally. So I think that you've got a lot of that, and that material is readily available for them. I also think that you naturally have lower density other than shanties and break areas and field offices. You naturally have lower density because you've got people working in larger areas of the floor that you can't have a ceiling guy on a floor guy on a sprinkler guy. So there's a natural separation of people other than the teams that work together. So I think I feel like we have really good guidance here. And again, I haven't seen, maybe we'll see when 130,000 people come back, but we haven't seen these wholesale outbreaks on job sites. So these are positive things.
I want to dovetail into that because we also have a question, not just about the contractors and tradespeople being back on site, but when will we, owners, rep, project managers, architects, engineers, be back on site? Technically, I believe we're all in phase 2. I know real estate is, so we're putting ourselves under, the real estate umbrella. I'm sure you guys have all done the same, but we've talked to our team. I've kind of polled people to make sure, individually that they're comfortable going back to the site and have to deal with individuals who may have underlying medical conditions or who are older. And so we have to deal with them independently. But also our architects and our engineers, most of them are also developing protocols for their own staff for returning to the site. So going out to, measure field conditions or do field reports, site inspections, all of that. And again, it behooves us. We have to ask all of our vendors what their protocols are. It's not necessarily our job to write them, but certainly to request them and to review them and to make sure that they're adequate. So my expectation, just to answer that question directly, is that within 2 weeks of construction starting, my staff, whoever's working on that project, will be back on site as long as, of course, they're legally able to do so.
And I would just add one quick point on that, Kirsten. Real life example. We've got a couple of hotel projects that have been ongoing for the past couple of weeks, and it's been amazing what's been accomplished with virtual tours and virtual inspections by the design team, room readiness and things of that nature with good high def cameras. I have to say the architectural team felt it was just as efficient as being there because the video quality is so good, and it actually probably saved a bit of time. It saved the travel time back and forth to the job site, certainly much safer. They weren't comfortable yet coming back to site. The contractor's been unbelievably cooperative, and they were able to get questions answered on the fly. It helped expedite the whole RFI process as well. So it's already happening out there, which is great. So I do think, to your point, for those first couple of weeks, maybe before you see project managers and architects and engineers show back up on site, certainly make use of some of those technologies.
Great, thanks. One of the questions that's been coming up has to do with freight elevators. So Brian Geller had asked a question, and I think Christopher Kelly from Moelis, if you want to talk about how you have addressed the situation with freight elevators on a current project that you're on right now, if you want to unmute and show your video.
Hi, Christopher, if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've been working with this. In fact, in our building, we have two two large construction two construction projects going on. Let's see if we can see me, sorry. There we go. We have two large construction projects going on in the building. One is us and one is another tenant, both over a couple 100,000 square feet or in that range. So I'm sure you can appreciate the pressure that puts on the building regardless of the current situation or not. So we have worked out with our landlord and both our contractor and that of the other tenant to use the messenger service entrance into the building lobby, and we've put up and are putting up temporary partitions that then let the tradesmen go from essentially the freight entrance through messenger into the building. Then we're giving them dedicated passenger cars that again will be walled off with temporary partitions, so that when you go, if you're an employee and you go back into the office, there'll be a temporary wall splitting some of the elevators from you to the others. And so individuals are going to go up and down in those elevators, and then only materials that are coming in will actually go into the freight. This will allow, a much better flow, as part of that process.
It's great. Very innovative, Chris. That's great.
Great suggestion. I know that there's been a few questions. I think we've answered everything that has to do with freight elevators. I just want to go to Mike Neary. Mike, if you want to turn on and your question, your financial question. There he is. I think you're still muted, Mike. There you go.
Hi, Fran. Yeah,
Hi.
obviously that's a big concern out there with subcontractors being shut down for a number of months and going through layoffs, that we're all very concerned and focused on it. No matter what kind of financial shape they were in prior to the pandemic, they're going to be that much more challenged and put into severe, position when we're demanding heavy manpower, et cetera, and from material and suppliers. So I think it's going to be a challenge for our local industry, and we're going to have to really stay on top of it. And we have to be worried for financial failures on the subcontractor side, since they're not typically so financially strong with the kind of, bottom lines of public companies, et cetera. So that's going to be an industry concern and challenge going forward.
And I saw that question and I wanted to jump in on that. And I think I might have commented on the chat, but I think as project managers and owners reps, and I'm sorry if you can hear it, but there's ongoing construction right outside of my apartment. So it makes me feel very comfortable, but I apologize for the background noise. It's our job to move our projects along smoothly. And sometimes that means telling our clients that they have to pay bills in a more timely fashion. I know that something I've done in the past to keep subcontractors going, making sure that they get money to pay the tradespeople that we need every day, is I have, for a period of time, I've allowed a contractor to bill every 2 weeks so that there's a consistent flow of money for some period of time. Maybe it's the whole project if it really needs it, but it's our job to explain those things to our clients and make them understand why, especially after something like this, especially after, people have been shut down and had no income for months at a time. And the clients have to, they have to buy into that as well. And they have to be committed to that and committed to a process where we get invoices, we review them quickly, and they get them through their system and get money into the pockets of the subcontractors and those tradespeople to keep the job going.
Thanks, Kirsten. I think Larry Charlip he had another point. Larry, if you want to jump on about pulling up to your building this morning and there was construction going on, go ahead.
Yeah, so I understand the procedures that are being put in place. I'm in the office today and I pulled up and there was, must have been about 12 tradesmen, obviously on a coffee break this morning at around 10 o'clock. All of them, it looked like a normal break time. They were all standing in a circle. Nobody was wearing masks, smoking cigarettes, passing phones around because they were looking at each other's phones, literally sitting on top of each other, sitting outside of a building. So I'm just curious as to what are the recommended procedures and how are companies handling those lunches and breaks?
Yeah, so look, Larry, one of the interesting things is that we can control and write lots of protocols about the best recommended ways to deal with this stuff, but at a certain point, it does land on personal responsibility. And once they leave the confines of the job site, because in many ways we're not allowing them to break on the job, because that's where they normally congregate on 5-gallon buckets and they're all sitting around in one room. They're leaving the space. So you lose some level of control when they leave the space. And unfortunately, that's something that's almost impossible to control. And you hope that most people are going to be responsible. And there's also varying levels of fear out there, right? And a lot of this, 90% of this at this point, is fear management and what you can. Are you at risk? Are you fearful? Do you feel concerned about going on mass transit, which I know is a couple of comments that have come up as well. It's difficult. We would hope that the supers would do a tour quickly around and see if there's people outside that are on his job site that are not wearing masks and encourage them to do so. But we are going to get the folks that are protesting this to a certain extent, and if they're out of that ability, that control circle of the job, it's difficult to mandate that they wear those PPEs. But it's a bit frustrating. I completely agree.
And you can't control what they do once they go home either. So you
Correct.
kind of, you can only control how they're participating on the job. And if they're wearing the PPE on the job, maybe I've watched too much TV and too many news conferences, but it really is proven that the PPE helps. And so as long as they're following the rules on the job site, I think that's all any of us can, it's all we can control, certainly. And unfortunately, in some cases, all we can expect. I saw another question, if I can jump in here. Lori Huntner asked about any RFPs that were going out, taking into account additional costs for delivery and installation. And I think this runs, obviously, that's a furniture related question, but I think it goes across the board. In any RFPs that we have going out now, we should all be including, first of all, requirements that everyone follow any state and local COVID-19 requirements, including PPE, et cetera. And we have to ask that jobs be priced based on those requirements now, understanding that they could change in the future. So if you're going to have to break up deliveries, for example, of furniture because you can only have a certain number of people on site where you would normally, show up with a tractor trailer and a bunch of people and get it, load the job all in one night or one weekend, you're going to have to break that up. And again, I think it falls on us as project managers and owners reps to explain this to our clients and explain why some pricing may be, higher than maybe we budgeted. If we budgeted a job 6 months ago or a year ago, that's just coming around now, a lot of those costs are going to increase, and we'll have to be honest with them and then be creative with, how we can help them overcome that. And we talked a little bit about some of those.
Yeah, I also think that we're going to see, based on all the conversations I've had with contractors at this point and suppliers, I think we're going to see a short-term dip in pricing because I think people are going to be looking to fill their pipeline for the remainder of 2020. We've already seen some numbers come in that were 6-8% off of the kind of the pre-COVID numbers on the general contractor side. I think we regularly counsel our clients as owners, reps, and project managers on the trends in the markets. And I believe that we are going to see a short-term depression in cost to fill pipeline. But I think to Lori's point, we're going to see that escalate and go back up. And then you're going to see the incremental costs of time, PPE, spreading out manpower, all those other aspects we've talked about today. So I think we get these curves of stuff that happens, but it's out there, and we are already counseling our clients and seeing decent responses to that counsel on the fact that this is going to change and there's going to be some escalation.
Yeah, Richard, I can tell you across the country on, again, areas that haven't been as affected or resumed construction now a couple of weeks ago, that's exactly what happened, particularly at the sub-level. They were anxious to get their workers back. They were very competitive with numbers, but now we're starting to see, overall numbers start to creep back up again because of all those things you just mentioned. And as they really get into the logistics of the site and discover, how they have to change, workflow around the site, as we talked about earlier, whether the safety and health protocols really are working. We're starting to see in dribs and drabs, claims come in for some of that work as well. But thankfully, we're also seeing, a lot of contractors that are sharing in those costs, so they're not looking to completely pass them on to the client or to the owner. So, again, I think the more we can all cooperate, as a professional entity, designers, engineers, architects, project managers, assisting our clients and contractors, the better to work through this.
Thanks. Brian Geller, you had a couple of comments that you were making, if you want to turn on, about ways to keep going back to keeping the workforce safe and helping them with, lunch breaks and travel.
You hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. No, what we're doing at our company is certain jobs where there's more than 10 or 15 men, we're in the process of getting a smaller refrigerator up there where we can basically store the sandwiches and their drinks, which will allow the men not to have to go up and down the elevators as much, keep them basically secure on the space, and at the same time get more productivity out. Because the bottom line is it takes an hour to get down, most times before this happened with this pandemic, to get down an elevator with other floors working. So if we can keep the manpower basically in place on a floor, the workers then, A, won't be as exposed to too many people down the street, and at the same time be able to take a break for a half an hour, have a soda, have a sandwich, or do something which will allow them basically, for the owners of the contracting companies, to get a little more productivity out of these people. At the same point in time, the bathrooms are an issue because they're talking about bathrooms. You can only have one person in a bathroom at a time. So, that's going to be a situation that we're going to have to figure out. I don't really know how that's going to work. Is that a bathroom that's down in the basement where the men will have to go? Because you're not going to be using tenant spaces, because the tenants are going to be basically having to use their own bathrooms for their employees. So that's something that, really hasn't been spoken about. And it's kind of an important factor because that deals with a time factor, which is productivity. So I thought maybe I would ask Richard to answer that, or maybe John, somebody who can understand how we can get that accomplished.
Yeah, I think what I'm seeing, and Rich, feel free to jump in then. I know we're running out of time here, but your points are, very valid, Brian. And what we're finding is every job site is different. The logistics of every site, that vertical transportation component, restroom facilities. Some jobs are so compact, though. I'd be lying to say we've figured it out on every job site. But some of the initiatives you talked about, trying to keep workers on the floor contained, providing them the facilities to do that. Those are all great ideas. And again, I think every job site is going to be so unique throughout this city. From newer buildings to older buildings. Tight neighborhoods where just getting deliveries in and out is difficult, let alone getting into the buildings. But it is going to continue to present unique challenges, especially as job sites get more and more loaded up.
And I would just wrap it by saying, I think overall, the ideas that I'm hearing every time I talk to somebody who's out there doing something, Brian, in your case, and Tommy with Structured Tone and everyone else, the ideas that are coming in are so innovative and so thoughtful. Some of them may even last after this is all kind of settled down. So I love hearing that stuff. And I love, Brian, that idea of keeping guys on the job site takes care of Larry's concern that we talked about earlier. I mean, a lot of great ideas coming out to manage this. So thanks for everyone's thoughts.
I just want to real quick, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you to the panelists. A lot of great insight here, a lot of great information being traded. Wish we had another hour, right? Mm-hmm. But again, the Alliance would like to, as a group, we strive to be trusted advisors, using all of our aggregate expertise to bring together all the advances and news, and we like to apply them strategically to all of our clients' needs to meet the challenges in the crisis and, as always, mitigate the risk. Thank you.
Super. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining. I think we had fantastic audience participation there with lots of thoughts in the chat. Thanks again to our panelists. Fran, that was really well moderated. John, Kirsten, thanks for putting a smile on all the panelists' face halfway through that, which we won't share with the wider group. And Richard, great insight. We'll look forward to hearing more from the Alliance on how to meet the challenges through the crisis and emerge stronger. We look forward to seeing everyone next week. And with that, I will hand over to Tommy for any final comments. Thank you. You're on mute, Tommy.
Just thanks, everybody. This was great. Be safe and tune in next week for another good one. Thanks everybody.
all.
Thanks,
Super,
everybody.
thank you. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.